Welcome to this episode of Lifetime Talks and our series on performance and longevity with MIORA. I'm Jamie Martin, and I'm here with Jim LaValle. He is a longtime clinical pharmacist, has been practicing for over 40 years. And he's also the chief science officer for Lifetime. And today we are talking about peptides, what they are and what they can do for our health. And Jim, always so good to have you. Thanks for being with me.
Oh, it's a blast. Can't wait.
I know, right? We're just going to keep going here. We got lots to cover. So when we hear about peptides, often right now, people have been hearing a lot about GLP-1s. Like that's the
Right.
peptide that's become really commonplace, or you think about the peptides that are maybe in some skincare lines or things like that. But let's just start very fundamental. What are peptides and what do they do for our health and well-being?
Sure. So peptides are small chains of individual amino acids that aren't as big as a protein.
Okay.
So a peptide is a string of amino acids that's shorter than a protein. And our body makes thousands of peptides that help us to regulate every aspect of our chemistry. So, peptides literally are the signaling compounds that keep our body in homeostasis or keep our body in balance. And it's interesting. I know as chair of the International Peptide Society, we've written over 100 monographs with all the scientific research on a variety of different peptides. And I think we're just at the threshold of where peptides are going to take us in the next decade or so.
Got it. So, are there categories of peptides that do certain things for us? For instance, like the skin, the things that help with skin, for instance, or maybe there's some peptides like that do help us manage type 2 diabetes or whatever that might be. Can you talk us through what those categories might be?
Yeah, literally, basically for any function in your body, you got peptides that can be a benefit. So, for example, insulin was really the first peptide to come to the market in the United States 100 years ago. So peptides aren't new. They're new from the standpoint of how many of them are in the market, how many people are utilizing them, how many practitioners are using them. So everything from immune function to cognitive health to gut health, blood sugar regulation, weight loss, longevity. So helping our body to preserve growth hormone release as we're aging, to preserve our lean mass, for example. A lot of different categories that actually peptides are great for. And the other thing it's really interesting, you mentioned skin.
Yeah.
So GHKCU, or known as copper peptide, very popular for the skin, but it also acts as a gene modulator. So it helps your genes to
Mm,
stay intact and not switch on or off based on how much stress you're under. So sometimes peptides do a variety of things.
got it.
So it's just important to keep that in mind.
So you said they can help with like the turning on and off. So that means that they're influenced by epigenetics, right? The lifestyle factors that happen, right? Is that what I'm
Well,
interpreting?
epigenetics influences your genes,
Yep.
and something like a peptide would help the negative influences keep you from expressing the negative effect of maybe the food you're eating, the exposures that you have, the stress you're under, all those kind of
So
things.
they can have a protective factor.
That's right.
Okay, great. Um, so if our bodies can naturally produce peptides and they are doing that, why all of a sudden is there more of these that are becoming more available to kind of complement our health with and to use from a medical standpoint?
Yeah, well, so when you think of, once again, what are peptides?
Yep.
Peptides are signaling molecules. So depending on what problems you're having with your body, you may need more of that signaling molecule to restore health. So
Right.
if you get a muscle tear
Mm.
or a bone break, or maybe you're getting symptoms from your gut for some reason. You're eating certain foods, you're becoming sensitive to them, you've got a permeable gut now, and a peptide could help with that. So you keep in mind that peptides are, in my opinion, they're meant to restore balance and meant to really help heal conditions.
Mm.
I think the older you get, the more you may need to use certain peptides in order to kind of maintain that balance, because we lose our capacity as we're aging a little bit to be able to make these things. And depending on what our epigenetics are, as you mentioned before, if you're making a lot of bad decisions and pushing your body in the wrong direction, well, your body just doesn't naturally overcome that by making more peptides. It it's moving in a direction where you need a higher production in order to get things back on the right track.
That makes total sense. Does there tend to be, with time, a natural decline in peptide production with age?
Yeah, I think, growth hormone release is a good, interesting one. Your body makes plenty of growth hormone as you're aging, but it just gets stored in your pituitary and you don't listen to the signal. It's called growth hormone releasing hormone. So your body's making a compound, a peptide, to tell the body to release growth hormone,
Got it.
right?
Okay.
So as you're aging, you may make less of that. Same thing with your immune system. I
Mhm.
mean, as you age, your natural killer cells, the cells that get out there and fight the good fight against infection,
Yep.
you tend to decline in your ability to make those. And so, for example, one of the interesting peptides that I think, has human data on it, thymosin alpha 1 helps your thymus gland to make immune compounds that keep you resilient to being sick. So as you're getting older, it's important, I think, to think about, well, if you think of aging as a disease,
Mhm.
why wouldn't you want to create the countermeasures, which are peptides,
Mhm.
uh, to help age gracefully
Yeah.
without illness? Aging without errors is the way I like to put it.
Ooh, aging without errors. I like that as like a little catchphrase or something.
Yeah,
That's interesting.
exactly.
Um, you mentioned in acute situations, so let's like say you have the muscle tear or the bone break.
Right.
Is that a form of kind of treatment for healing that is becoming more common that you're starting to see? Or is this still something that's a little bit on the fringe and starting to make its way into the mainstream?
Well, chairing the International Peptide Society and co-chairing the American Academy of Anti-Aging Medicine, right? There's thousands of doctors that come to learn about
Hmm.
the use of peptides and small molecules and other innovative therapies, bioidentical hormones, the things that we're really looking at, you know, with MIORA
Yep.
at lifetime, right? So I think it's becoming more commonplace. More healthcare providers are looking at it and wanting to do research on it. Universities are wanting to do research on it. So I think that as I said, over the next decade, when we first, started our conversation, it's like, I think over the next decade, we're going to see a big movement into peptides and small molecules, which quite honestly, pharma, drug companies already have a significant pipeline of peptides for specific reasons. They just approved another one about 3 weeks ago
Mm,
for mitochondrial health,
mm.
uh, called peptide SS31, right? So I think it's all on the way.
It's all coming. So, I mean, to that point, that's starting to be more of these being approved by the FDA or wherever it is. What is the research that's been done on a lot of these? I mean, who's conducting it and how are they kind of then getting it out there?
Big question.
There's a lot to
Yeah,
that.
big question. Well, I mean, in general, research gets done on compounds that have a potential application. And when they get to certain phases where it can show human safety, many times peptides will begin to get manufactured in compounding pharmacy
Okay.
for human use. Safety data is there, but it's not a fully approved FDA drug yet,
Okay.
but it can be utilized if it's made for human use. And so universities do the research,
Mhm.
companies pay to have research done,
Yeah.
and then gets published. And then, what we like to do is rank, well, how good's the research, right?
Yeah.
Is it three gerbils?
Yeah.
I mean,
Maybe
was it?
not.
Yeah,
Maybe
maybe.
more
I think we want to go more than that. But honestly, is it animal studies? Is it lab studies? Is it in vitro, in vivo? Is it a human case report? Is it a randomized trial?
Yep.
Those are all the things that we look at for level of evidence
Yep.
for a peptide, right?
Yeah.
So, I think that amazing amount of research is starting to percolate through,
Mhm.
the universities right now.
Yeah. Oh, it's super interesting to see just like all the different potential applications that it can have
Well,
to influence human health and well-being, right? On that note, when you think about it, what are some of the most common medical types or uses of peptides that you're seeing right now? And are there any like risks or what do people use them for?
sure. So The big one of them's gut health.
Yep.
I mean, very big because people more and more because of antibiotic use,
Yep.
proton pump inhibitors, acid blocking medications, maybe their diet, their history of maybe other medications or stress that they're under. For one reason or another, they get gut permeability problems, meaning that peptides from your food get through the gut lining and then your immune system reacts to that. And so you want to seal off that permeability problem. And there are peptides that work for that. Body composition, obviously, everybody's heard of GLP-1s.
Yep.
GLP-1s and GIP medications are peptides, and that's for body composition, for one, lose fat mass, maintain lean mass. And then in addition to that, it would be for people with type 2 diabetes, insulin resistance, so all the way into conditions. And then there's compounds for immune function. So that helps you to just become more resilient, so when you get where you're under a lot of stress or you're getting older and you lose your capacity on your immune system. Then there are, metabolic peptides that work on the mitochondria. So, everybody's at mitochondrial health now is the big buzzword.
Yep.
Everybody's talking about the mitochondria. Well, there are peptides that actually help to rejuvenate and protect the
Awesome.
mitochondria inside your cells. And then there's things like anti-aging peptides that help us to reprogram our suprachiasmatic nucleus, which is a big word,
Yep.
right?
That's
I like
referring to
this.
your ultradian rhythms, your circadian
Yes,
rhythms.
right. It
Yeah.
helps to balance out your circadian rhythms and
Yeah.
helps you to continue to release growth hormone as you're aging. So,
Mhm.
and I'm just touching the surface.
I know. I'm like, there's
There's
so much here.
hormone
Yeah.
regulation. I mean, there's so much that peptides are. They're just an exciting new tool in the toolkit
Mhm.
for healthcare providers and for the people who utilize them to help them move their health forward.
So let's say that somebody's listening to this episode and they're intrigued and they have some health issue that they've been dealing with for a while. How do you recommend that they start the conversation with their healthcare provider around peptides?
Well, I think they probably need to provide a book to their provider.
Mm. Yep.
Read up on this if you could,
Yep.
right? I know I wrote a handbook on peptides with some of my colleagues. I was the lead author on it. And we did that for a reason. We did that to kind of get healthcare providers and consumers on the same page about, hey, this is what a peptide is. This is where it's good for you. But you know what? It also may be where you should have caution.
Mm.
So, for example, secretagogues are the ones that help you release growth hormone. So everybody's talking about sermorelin, ipamorelin, CJC 1295. When I'm saying these terms,
Yeah.
everybody out there listening, they're already dialed in on it. I can tell you right now. So the point being is there are some things that if you had a history of cancer, for example, you should know that maybe those aren't a good selection for you,
Mhm.
or that you may develop a rash or an allergic reaction. That could be something you'd want to know. So I think you need to search someone out who's experienced
Yeah.
at peptides. But I'd also encourage people, if they're going to utilize peptides, that they don't take them on their own and try to go out and buy them off the internet through,
Mhm.
research only facilities. I think that creates an area of risk, and two, people are kind of looking at these as if they're supplements. These are very powerful compounds that somebody should be having some oversight with you as to, hey, how's it working for you?
Right.
Is it going in the right direction? Are we seeing some benefit? Or is there anything that has a concern? GLP-1s, for example, could raise your amylase and lipase, which
Mm.
would mean you could get pancreatitis.
Mm.
It's rare, but it is reported. So you gotta, I
Be
think, have
aware.
responsible about these and not just think, oh, hey, this is like taking ginkgo,
Right.
which it's
It's
not.
different.
It's way
Right.
different. It's a whole different level.
Yeah. Well, and even to that point, you hear about like the therapeutic uses of peptides,
Right.
and then there's also like the cosmetic side. So like I think we should differentiate between those two so people understand what the differences are.
Sure. I mean, I think on cosmetics, because we teach at A4M, we have a master class in the Peptide Society on, derm and cosmetics and the use of peptides. And so, I mean, literally, you can microneedle peptides,
Mhm.
and the nice thing about that is it'll build collagen scaffolding, and you'll
Mhm.
create nice, youthful skin. But that's different than injecting something into your body on a regular basis for a therapeutic target. I'm trying to, lose weight, or I'm struggling with being able to absorb food.
Mhm.
It's just a little bit different. So, but cosmetic peptides, honestly, they're still incredibly effective. It's
Mhm.
just that you're losing a little bit of that risk. So copper peptide, for example, is one of the ones everybody's putting into their creams and their
Yeah.
solutions and serums now. OSO1, which is a small molecule, a it's not a peptide, but it's considered a small molecule. So
Yep.
family related.
Yep.
Well, that's probably the most popular thing out there right now for
Right.
like skin crepiness as
Yep.
you're aging.
Yep.
So you hear of like one cream, it's OSO1,
Yeah.
right? And that compound is really interesting for skin,
Mhm.
but it's different if you're doing that for skin versus taking it to help with lean mass, because you have to be on that 6 weeks, off 4 weeks if you're doing it orally versus topically.
Interesting.
So that's where it kind of
Yep.
varies based on what your
Yep.
goal is, and then also where are you applying this? Is it on the
Right.
skin, or are you putting it in your body?
Right, and when you say that, you mentioned, like, it can be injected, I'm assuming, but then also there are the oral, like, in pill form that you can take many of these.
Yeah, no, I mean, look, I think there's an incredible evolution on peptides that are
Mhm.
taking place right now with
Yep.
delivery systems, right? So you can do oral liposomal tablets now that really deliver peptides at a very equivocal injection
Mhm.
amount, right?
Got
So
it.
it actually works. So I think that was kind of a big at the early days, they were just kind of popping them into capsules.
Yeah.
And now we know that, okay, we have to deliver, we got to get these small molecules to get absorbed into your body. And so there's some really interesting technologies where it could be a topical, it could be a tablet,
Mhm.
obviously injection.
Yep.
And then there's topicals that go deep all the way into your tissues and can get distributed
Mm.
into everywhere. So there's some really interesting stuff going on there.
We're just on the cusp in, like, the very beginning stages in many cases with
I know,
this.
I'm excited. That's the pharmacist in me versus the clinical nutritionist versus,
Yeah.
the other areas of studies I've been in, right?
Yep. Well, what's interesting to me is even you saying, like, okay, if I'm gonna talk to my doctor, like, you recommend them reading a book. I mean, probably similar to what you often hear about, medical school. There's not a lot talked about regarding nutrition. There's probably not a lot talked about in regarding peptides. So, like, there is additional education that I'm assuming now that's coming out for medical providers to learn more beyond the books. Is there, hopefully,
Well, no, there is, I
trainings?
mean, I have 2 to 300 docs at a time
That's
in
awesome.
the room that we're educating, and I
Yep.
bring in doctors who are clinicians that utilize it in order to teach. So
Yep.
I think that's happening. I don't think it's, if you ask somebody about semaglutide,
Mhm.
a healthcare provider, and you said, "Tell me what category of compound that is,"
Mhm.
I'm not sure they would all go, "Oh, that's a peptide."
Mm.
You know?
Interesting. What would
Me
they say? Like, what do you think the response would be?
it's a drug,
Mm. Okay. Versus this
right?
category
It's this
of
it yeah,
opportunity.
so I think there's a little bit of that education that's going on now where so now they know because everybody's talked about peptides and GLP-1s.
Yep.
They're familiar with insulin, insulin's a peptide.
Yep.
I think that's breaking through that glass ceiling, and then
Mhm.
there's that, understanding. And look, social media drives a lot of this information,
Mhm.
so more and more docs have to stay up on, what are people listening to? Is it legitimate or not? I can tell you right now, there's a lot of, I would say, bad information being given out by people who don't have any kind of training, don't understand that peptides are different than a supplement, and that's where I think it's good that doctors play a conservative role,
Mhm.
just to give you a voice of reason.
Yep. So kind of finding that balance, but also for yourself being informed, reading up on it, understanding what these pieces are. That's why we're doing this topic, honestly, so people understand what the differences are in many of
Absolutely.
these places. So, um, you already mentioned like do's and don'ts of peptides. Anything you would want to add there, kind of making sure that you're talking to your healthcare provider, working with somebody, being
The
conservative.
the biggest don't is do not read about a peptide online or just listen to an influencer who may or may not have had experience at it. because it's one of the hottest areas, right?
Mhm, mhm.
And then go and order it online from a research, because the difference between research only versus for human use,
Yep.
research only doesn't have to go through the rigor of testing all of the stages and documenting the product so that the finished product is safe
Mm,
for a human to inject into their body.
right.
Now, I'm not going to comment on what research peptide companies, maybe they do things right. I no idea. I just know that they're not required to.
Yeah, so you know
Uh,
that there's standards elsewhere that you have to follow.
exactly. So I'd really discourage people from, doing research peptides. Go and get them from healthcare providers that are writing scripts to compounding pharmacies
Mhm,
that make things for human use.
yeah. Okay, any final thoughts or good to know tips regarding peptides that you wanna share before we wrap this up? Really, this is meant to be our primer on peptides.
Well, I mean, I think for me personally, over the last 10 years, maybe a little more than that now, peptides absolutely revolutionized the way the clinics that I work with are able to get results. We
Mm,
can get higher impact results more quickly. You know, patients are happier more just because of the ability to create these
mm,
very focused signals that help the body to get back
yeah,
in balance. Don't be afraid of them.
mhm,
They're compounds that your body should be making, but they're not making them anymore for the most part. But then also make sure that they're not just a peptide that's been recently researched and has no science behind them, because there's a lot of that out there too.
yeah. So being that informed consumer as always
Absolutely.
and working with your healthcare provider. Well, Jim, this is a good starting point for us. If
Yeah.
people wanna learn more, they can visit miora.lifetime.life. You have lots of other podcasts and other content that we've worked to create with you on this topic. Thank you for joining me as always.
It's great to be here.